Trump wants Russia back into the G7. They were kicked out in 2014 for the invasion of Ukraine. And I can see why Europe doesn't want Russia back into the G7, but I can also see where that could actually be beneficial. Also, I can see where Boris Johnson, the new Prime Minister of UK, really wants to be, friends with Trump, because the UK is about to leave the EU, so they're going to need some free trade agreements, and they're probably going to get that from the US. So I think all in all, it went pretty well, but I would say China is really stressful, and just watching the communication between the two, it just didn't really seem very positive. Consumers in China and in America, we're seeing prices of raw goods increase and increase and increase, and it's not really helping our steel industry the way that Trump describes it. You see a lot of retaliatory tariffs as well. So I think free trade is the way we need to go. But with the tariffs, they create immediate results for Trump. He can say that U.S. Steel, Nucor Steel, they're doing better now, which they are. And that's going to help him get reelected in 2020. But in the long term, I don't think that's going to help the global economy. I agree with Trump on that Germany needs to spend their appropriate amount on defense. I can see where that's very frustrating. And I can see where, a lot of countries in Europe kind of really depended on the G7 because of post-World War II and needing to rebuild. But part of me wonders how necessary it is now. It seems like it's kind of a clique, and other countries could be involved on these negotiations because our economy is just so global now that 7 nations, even though they're very 7 powerful nations, there's a lot more out there that needs to be involved in negotiations. Nothing really happened with the Amazon rainforest on fire. They talked about it, but no progress on that, and that's something that affects this entire planet.
Always be a waste of time. It's a lot of talking and not a lot of problem solving. It focuses on a lot of very large, hot topics that do need to be addressed, but it doesn't actually go over problem solving. Like, what are you going to contribute to said problem? And then those who do make promises usually don't fulfill their obligations to it, which forces it all really to go back on the UN. But the UN is the poorest military organization in the world because nobody does their part. So my personal takeaway from the G7 is that it's business as normal. Nothing's changed. I didn't see anybody actually fired up to do anything productive. High hopes, but nothing particular. The reason why they are good is economically and trading and whatnot. You can argue one way or the other. It doesn't really matter of your opinion. There's valid points on both sides as well.
Right.
But thus far, it has been good to show a stern economical response to China's actions, making it difficult for them to do business and make money. Now, overall, is a tariff good? That's really just an opinion and a debate of how you wish to value a tariff. It's good for trade and good for social and economic economies, but long-lasting, they're generally not. I personally view the tariffs as an economical response to Chinese actions. So I approve.
My main takeaway was just some of the somewhat increased tension from an economic standpoint with all the trade disputes that are going on right now. It's a lot of the G7 members, which have been fairly cordial over the past decade or two. There's more tension now that there's some debate over trade policy and stuff like that. So that's one of the main things as an economist I was looking at was these trade disputes.
Yeah, so what's your opinion on the Chinese tariffs?
Very opposed to it, generally speaking, as virtually all economists are. Tariffs are always a bad idea. They hurt both sides. They don't help anyone in particular. So that was disappointing to see. But again, we just don't know how it's going to unfold yet. So.
Right. Do you expect a recession?
Not from that in particular. I think it could contribute, but trade policy, because only of about 6% of our GDP comes, or at least net exports come from trade, it's possible, but usually trade wars don't themselves cause a recession, they just make them a lot worse.
Right.
Usually recessions are caused by more fundamental factors kind of within a nation. But it could definitely be something, if we have a recession, here's what it will do. It will slow down growth, which it already has. Again, if it lowers growth from 4% to 3%, that's billions of dollars. That's bad in and of itself. But especially if you have an economic downturn, the same thing happened in the Great Depression. You had these Smoot-Hawley tariffs. Every country started raising its tariffs, and it made a bad recession even worse. So that's definitely possible. Talks of the U.S. wanting to purchase Greenland, it makes more sense for the U.S. to purchase something like a big chunk of the Amazon and preserve it, treat it like a national park. And there were a lot of people saying, we have all these billionaires like Tom Steyer who's going to be spending literally billions of dollars running for president and not winning. He could easily use that billions of dollars, that money, buy huge chunks of the rainforest and make sure they're not deforested. So I would like to see that. But either us as a nation or individual investors who care a lot about that issue, all they have to do is buy that land up. The government in Brazil is running out of money. They're desperate to sell off land.
Yeah.
And once you buy it, then guess what? You can protect it. It's the same thing the U.S. government does with national parks. They essentially say, we're taking this land and no one can develop it.